What happens when millions of people can no longer find enough work? Not because they're lazy, not because they aren't educated, not because the economy collapsed, but because a machine can do their job faster, cheaper, and 24 hours a day. Think about that. For most of modern history, society has operated on a simple agreement. You work, you get paid, you use the money to live. But artificial intelligence could challenge that agreement. Because here's the problem. AI doesn't need a paycheck. Humans do. And if artificial intelligence eventually performs enough human labor, governments may face a question that once sounded almost ridiculous. Do we eventually have to pay people simply because they're citizens? Welcome to Snakz Thoughts. Let's talk about it. Now, we've seen technology destroy jobs before. People have been afraid of machines taking jobs for hundreds of years, and sometimes those fears were justified. Agriculture once required enormous numbers of workers. Then tractors, harvesters, irrigation systems, and industrial farming transformed agriculture. Factories changed manufacturing. Machines replaced jobs that once required entire teams. Computers changed offices. The internet transformed retail, banking, travel, entertainment, journalism, and communications. But historically, something else usually happened. Technology destroyed certain jobs and eventually created other jobs. The farmer's son became a factory worker. The factory worker's daughter became an office worker. The office worker's child became a programmer. Human beings kept moving. But artificial intelligence presents a different question. What happens when the technology doesn't automate one industry? What happens when it begins automating human cognitive labor itself? Writing, programming, accounting, customer service, research, translation, design, administrative work, data analysis, legal support, marketing, scheduling, and eventually, when AI combines with robotics, warehouses, transportation, manufacturing, food preparation, delivery, construction tasks, possibly even parts of healthcare. Now we're dealing with something different. We're not talking about replacing the shovel. We're talking about building something capable of performing portions of the worker's thinking. And we're already seeing significant automation exposure. Current 2026 research from SHRM estimates that about 1/5 of U.S. wage and salary employment already has at least half its tasks automated. But importantly, the same research estimates a much smaller share. About 5% is presently at high risk of actual displacement because many jobs still have practical barriers preventing complete replacement. And don't think this isn't coming and happening overseas. Oh, yes. Now, that's an important distinction. AI exposure does not automatically mean unemployment, but the direction deserves attention. Now, the economic problem nobody can ignore. Here's where things get interesting. Companies exist partly to reduce cost. Imagine two companies selling the same product. Company A employs 10,000 people. Company B discovers AI and robotics can produce the same output with 2,000 people. Company B suddenly has an enormous cost advantage. What does Company A do? Eventually, company A probably automates too. Not necessarily because its executives hate workers, because competition pressures them. And that's where this becomes bigger than individual companies. Imagine millions of businesses making that same decision. Each individual decision makes economic sense, but collectively we could create a serious problem because workers aren't merely workers, workers are customers. The person getting paid by one company spends that paycheck somewhere else. They buy groceries, they pay rent, they purchase clothing, they finance cars, they go to restaurants, they subscribe to streaming services, they travel, they pay mortgages, they buy products. So, what happens if companies become extraordinarily productive? Yeah, another person's debt is someone else's income. Now, but people, because of the automation and the extreme productivity, people receive fewer wages. Who's buying everything? That's the contradiction. A highly automated economy could theoretically produce enormous wealth while simultaneously reducing the traditional mechanism that distributes purchasing power. Jobs. Economists are actively studying versions of this problem. There isn't agreement that mass unemployment is inevitable, and some research specifically warns against assuming it is. But concerns about AI driven inequality and weakened consumer demand are serious enough that they're now part of mainstream economic debate. And that brings us to universal basic income. Now, universal basic income sounds complicated. The basic concept isn't every eligible citizen or resident receives a recurring amount of money. You don't necessarily have to be unemployed. You don't necessarily have to prove poverty. You simply receive a baseline income. Imagine hypothetically every adult receives $1,500 monthly or $2,000, whatever number policymakers determine. You could still work, you could still start businesses, you could still invest, you could still earn additional money, but beneath everything would exist an economic floor. That's UBI. Now, before somebody jumps into the comments, I'm not saying UBI is definitely going to happen. There have been some pilot programs. Yes, there have. And I'm not saying it's necessarily the best solution. In fact, economists disagree strongly about it. The International Labor Organization published research in 2026 arguing that universal basic income should not be treated as the answer to AI labor disruption, and that employment policy and social protection require broader approaches. But artificial intelligence makes the UBI conversation much harder to dismiss. Because if machines eventually perform enough economically valuable work, governments may need another mechanism for distributing purchasing power. Where would the money come from? Possibilities include taxes on corporate profits, taxes on automated production, taxes on AI-generated economic activity, sovereign wealth funds, public ownership stakes, capital gains, or economic structures we haven't invented yet. And prominent AI leaders have increasingly discussed universal basic income or related redistribution mechanisms as possible responses to major technological displacement. But here's where this conversation gets deeper, because money isn't actually the biggest problem. What happens to human purpose? Anybody remember the mouse utopia? Now ask somebody, what do you do? Usually they'll tell you their occupation. I'm a teacher. I'm military. I'm a mechanic. I'm a nurse. I'm a truck driver. I'm an accountant. I'm an electrician. I'm a lawyer. I'm a business owner. Notice something in the pattern? We often describe who we are by what we do for money. Work gives people more than income. It provides structure, status, routine, social interaction, responsibility, achievement, purpose, identity, sometimes dignity. Now imagine an economy where millions of people no longer work to 40 hours every week. That sounds wonderful initially. Initially it does. Sleep late, travel, play video games, watch television, relax. But after 6 months, 2 years, 10 years, then what? Human beings need meaning. You cannot solve that simply by depositing money into somebody's account or basically giving the world a welfare check. And that's where the UBI debate becomes bigger than economics. It becomes psychological, cultural, social, even spiritual. Now, what happens to the family? Now, let's go somewhere people don't usually take this conversation. The modern family was shaped partly by economics. For generations, people's lives revolved around employment schedules. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat, sleep, repeat. Children attend school while parents work. Cities are designed around commuting. Suburbs developed around workplace. Marriage patterns changed alongside women's participation in the labor force. Entire family structures evolved alongside industrial capitalism. Now imagine AI dramatically reducing required human working hours. Maybe the normal work week becomes 30 hours, then 20. Maybe some industries require almost no routine human labor. Suddenly, families have something modern society has systematically removed: time. Parents could spend more time raising children. People could care for aging parents. Communities could become more socially connected. People could volunteer, create art, exercise, study, travel, build businesses, mentor younger generations, or people could become isolated, addicted, directionless, chronically entertained, but deeply unfulfilled. Technology doesn't decide which future we get. Culture does. Now, human beings have adapted before, and we always do. There's another side of this. Every generation believes its technological disruption is unprecedented. Sometimes they're wrong. Human beings are remarkably adaptable and resilient. When farming became mechanized, society changed. When factories emerged, society changed. When automobiles arrived, society changed. When computers arrived, society changed. When the internet arrived, society changed. Jobs disappeared, new ones appeared. Entire industries emerged that previous generations couldn't imagine. Someone living in 1920 wouldn't understand YouTuber, app developer, cybersecurity analyst, cloud architect, social media manager, drone operator, artificial intelligence engineer, professional streamer. Those occupations would sound ridiculous. So AI may eliminate millions of tasks while simultaneously creating industries we cannot currently imagine. That's possible. And that's why predictions of inevitable mass unemployment should be treated cautiously. But there's still something different about AI. Previous machines generally expanded human physical capability. AI expands and sometimes substitutes for human cognitive capability. That makes the range of potentially affected occupations unusually abroad. Like I said, overseas, anybody is coming worldwide. So maybe AI doesn't eliminate work. Maybe it changes what society considers valuable human work. Now, the question of ownership. Here's the question I think matters most, or matters more than almost everything else. Who owns the machines? Suppose AI makes the company twice as productive. Great. But who receives that additional wealth? If millions of people own shares in AI-driven companies through retirement accounts, investment funds, pensions, sovereign wealth funds, or direct ownership, automation could make society wealthier. But if ownership becomes concentrated among a tiny number of corporations and individuals, then AI could generate extraordinary wealth while simultaneously increasing inequality. Same technology, completely different society. That's why the future isn't simply about whether AI becomes powerful. It's about who participates economically in that power. And that could become one of the defining political questions of this century. Yeah. Now, faith, work, and human value. Now, let me take this somewhere else. If machines eventually outperform humans at enormous numbers of economic tasks, does that make humans less valuable? I don't believe it does. Because human value was never supposed to come entirely from economic productivity. A machine may eventually write faster, calculate faster, drive better, manufacture cheaper, diagnose certain conditions more accurately, but human existence isn't simply an economic competition against machines. As humans, we love, we raise children, we build relationships, we worship God, we sacrifice, we forgive, we create communities, we search for meaning, we experience mortality. Maybe AI eventually forces society to confront something we've avoided for generations. Your paycheck and your human worth were never the same thing. That's a much deeper conversation than whether ChatGPT or any other artificial intelligence can write somebody's email. Now, so does AI make UBI inevitable? No, not yet. Anyone claiming certainty is getting ahead of the evidence. AI could create enormous numbers of new occupations. Governments could shorten work weeks. Companies could use AI primarily to augment workers instead of replace them. People could increasingly become business owners. We could develop entirely different income distribution systems. UBI could happen. UBI could fail politically, or something completely different could replace it. But the underlying question isn't going away. If machines eventually perform a growing share of economically valuable work, how will humans receive enough purchasing power to participate in the economy those machines create? That's the real debate. Not will AI take my job tomorrow? The bigger question is, what happens when employment is no longer society's primary mechanism for distributing income? That would represent one of the largest economic transitions in human history. Now, as I close, so here's my thought. Don't panic about artificial intelligence, but don't dismiss what's happening either. Learn it, use it, understand it, invest where appropriate, teach your children about it. Because technological revolutions reward people who recognize change early. AI could eliminate jobs. AI could create jobs. Artificial intelligence could increase inequality. AI could create abundance. It could force governments to consider universal basic income, or it could produce an economic model nobody has thought of yet. Nobody knows exactly where this goes, but one thing is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. For hundreds of years, humans built an economy where survival depended heavily on selling human labor. Now, we're building machines capable of performing increasingly sophisticated portions of that labor. And eventually, society may have to answer a question we've never seriously confronted before. What happens when the economy needs human beings as consumers more than it needs them as workers? Because remember, AI doesn't need a paycheck. Humans do. I'm Snakz, and those are my thoughts. Subscribe and join Snakz Thoughts. SNAKZTHOUGHTS. Snakz Thoughts, which can be found the podcast on Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio PBM, SoundCloud, and a host of other social media outlets. Also, I have a YouTube channel, Eric Broadus YouTube, ERICBROADUS on YouTube. So please, if you feel inclined and you like the content over there, also smash that bell to become a subscriber. Turn on all notifications. And either way, hit the like or unlike button and leave a comment. Love to dialogue with you on Snakz Thoughts and on Eric Brothers YouTube. Lastly, I have Snakz123 on Rumble. SNAKZ123 on Rumble. So join and follow me on Rumble. And either way, leave a comment, hit the like or unlike button. But please share Snakz Thoughts, share Eric Brothers YouTube, and Snakz123 on Rumble. We learn together, we grow together. Peace out, guys. Catch you on the next one later.